All right, well, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for all you coming on this New Year's Eve. Begin our celebration of the new year. My name is John Cosgrove. I am honored to be one of the moderators for this study. It is one of the most important things that I do in the course of a week or a month. What I get out of this is far more than what I can receive, but it is an absolute honor every time I stand in front of you to do this. Before we get started, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, many of us know Orville and Odell, who just flew in from Japan last night. They left us, some time ago. We didn't think we'd ever see them again because they disappeared into the jungle. What place did you go to?
Papua, Indonesia.
Papua. It's a huge tourist trap there, I understand. Anyway, they are doing God's work there, and welcome. So glad. When do you go back?
3 weeks.
All right, great. Well, great to see you. Prayers go out for, just so everybody knows, Valerie kind of took a turn for the worse, Marlene's daughter, and she is downtown right now in Erland. And so we'll try to keep people posted there. She's had health issues. And so we can only be but hopeful and pray hard. This morning, this can be a difficult lesson. And so I want to set the stage for this properly. What I hope from this lesson happens, like we do every time we enter this room, is that some change takes place somewhere within you because of a discussion, because of what somebody says, or how you think. Some change takes place within you that causes you to walk your path even better. There's wonderful opportunity in this particular lesson to do that. But it's going to depend upon your internal reflections, how you think about your life. And so let's get started. If we want to change society, our community, our church, what power do you have to do that? Where does your power lie? Yes.
Only in yourself.
I can't change you, but I can change me. It's within me. So it starts there. I'm not so sure how productive it is. Sometimes it might be. I'm not passing judgments here. For me to say, you could do better. I think before I do that, I have to work hard on putting the finger here first. Or if I change, others will change around me. The question is how I want that to happen. And that's a tough question. I just finished a significant project. I wrote a book. It took me 4 years. It's going to be published this next quarter. It's on leadership. But it's a book on stories and my leadership theories and how they are embedded through my stories. Stories are true. They're all true. It was not written at all with the intent of being a profit center. I don't care about that. But my intent was to see what I could do to make change. And in the process of doing this, that is what I discovered. For telling the stories, I had to self-reflect. And the stories sometimes are things that I thought I did all right. And then there are some stories that I think I could have done better. And you have to tell both. Or lessons can be learned from both. I have I think there are times, and I want you to think about it. Think of a time when you did good. Were you, because of a decision or a behavior, you impacted, you made change, you did good. Now, chances are, nobody knows that story. Chances are nobody, you've never said it, you've never told it. I can tell you what amazes me, not like this at all, about my wife. She does things that I don't even know if she doesn't want to. I know that takes place. I remember my sister walking into my brother's living room recently, and in his living room were many, many pairs of shoes, children's shoes. Now, this is up in northern Michigan, up in Traverse City, Michigan. And there's a grocery department store by the name of Myers up there. Good with it? Well, every year before Christmas, Myers runs this kids' shoe sale. Buy one, get one free. There's 5 Myers within an hour of where we live. So Tom goes to every single Myers store and buys them out. Parts of shoes. Now, some Myers, 3 of them, 2 of the Myers stores would only sell 10 pairs. The rest doesn't let them have them all. I mean, there was a lady that was in there and she got very upset with my brother because she wanted to buy shoes and they were all sold out because they're all in his cart. So Tom sits back and says, well, pick out a pair, they're yours. So she does, and off they go. What he does with these shoes then is he goes to the schools, the elementary schools in the area. Now, he doesn't want to give them to an organization to distribute them. He wants them to go right into the school. So the teacher sees a kid that needs shoes, sends him down to the office, comes back with shoes. He wants it right at the line. That's the objective. He didn't, now let me tell you, he didn't want anybody to know about it. My sister just walked in, he's there. I think that's a pretty good act. What makes it so good is that notoriety has nothing to do with it. Just do it. Put shoes on the kids. Can you think of anything in your life where you did good? That's worth reflection. Don't mention it, because if you mention it, you kind of ruin it, you know? But then there are those other times when maybe my decisions and my behaviors weren't as good. You think of any of those? I want you to think about it. You want to share it, fine. Here's but an example. Many years ago, I was in the Army. I graduated from West Point. And I was assigned to the Old Guard. Anybody ever hear about that? The Old Guard. The Old Guard of the Army, 3rd U.S. Infantry. It's in Washington, D.C. It's the Presidential Honor Guard. Commanded the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, White House arrivals, departures. That was me. And I had a meeting every Monday at noon with my 4 lieutenants. And it was at 1 o'clock, my 4 lieutenants. And of course, we're infantry officers. Your commander said to be there at 1 o'clock, you're there at 5 to 1. And invariably, I'd have this meeting and I'd show up 10, 15 minutes late. Well, how can I be late if it's my meeting? It's my meeting and I'm the committee. And I remember walking in one day and one of those lieutenants did this. Didn't roll his eye. Well, you don't do that. But he did this. And he put his hand in his pocket. You know they were talking about. I look back at now, look in the mirror, and I thought, how did I respect their time? If I have a value of respect for the individual, how did that honor that value? Well, it did. If I ask those lieutenants today, years later, to list those leaders that they respected versus those leaders they didn't, in their lives. I wonder what this guy was doing. I wouldn't do that today. That's in my book. I thought about that. I shouldn't have done that. But those reflections are important. So today, as we go through this story, I want everybody to take care, because it's pretty easy to point the finger. But I want everybody to self-reflect, because if change is going to take place, it's going to start from where? From me. And that's where I want this to go. For if you can think of something like that in the context of all this, we can get something out of the next, hour or two or three. No. Okay. The participants in our lesson today are Pharisees, tax collectors, and Jesus. So I did some research here, but I'll ask you first, for you scholars, and they're here. What was a Pharisee? Anyone describe a Pharisee? What was a Pharisee?
Politician.
We have a politician. Okay.
Religious leader.
They were religious leaders. They were. Yeah.
It was the dominant force of the religious side of the Jewish faith. And they were the majority, and they want to control the narrative.
How were they a dominant force? How?
Well, there was a power struggle among the groups, the Sadducees and the Pharisees. They were the ones that really won because of whatever political persuasions they were able to get on their favor.
Did the Sadducees and the Pharisees agree?
Not necessarily on all of it, but they have to go along with it.
They did agree on one thing. What was it? Huh?
Kill Jesus.
Crucifying Christ. They did agree on that.
Hate the Romans.
That's about it. Well, one hated him. One was kind of aligned with him.
Yeah, I understand.
Pharisees hated him. The others were aligned. So the Sadducees, you bring up a good point. The Sadducees, my research indicates they were the wealthy. They were kind of at the top of the food chain. The Pharisees were like middle-class business people. The Pharisees were included in the Sanhedrin to a limited extent. Why? This I didn't know. I had to research this. This I didn't know. The Pharisees were really pretty popular. In fact, the Pharisees, to some extent, were considered the heroes of the day among the people. And so, did the Pharisees like that position? Absolutely. They loved that position.
That's why the others were sad, you see.
I know. Yeah, when I was looking at this at 6 o'clock this morning, my watch, I said, well, how long will it be before I hear that? Good job.
I couldn't let you.
I know. Hey, what do you got over there? Good morning, everybody, by the way. Hi, Dwan. Anyway, so the Pharisees were an influential religious sect. They were known for their personal piety and obedience for the oral and written law. The oral and the written law. They taught that the Jews should obey all 600 plus laws in the Torah and obey the rituals concerning purification. And they did seem to control decision-making of the Sanhedrin. What did the Pharisees teach? Now, this is important context for our lesson. Because we've read this many times, by the way. But if you understand the background of these, you will understand this much better. So what did the Pharisees teach?
Don't work on the Sabbath.
Don't work on the Sabbath, because that was one of the rules, I guess. I'm guessing. Yeah,
not just follow their beliefs, but also they set the interpretation of the law of the Talmud, based on the Talmud and the Torah.
well, basically you're getting to the weeds farther than I know. You obviously know more about this than I do, with all due respect. But I do believe this. I do think that they did teach the oral law and the written law. And one of the things that are challenging, which we have to talk about, is they got to a point where the oral law took up the same importance as the written law, the same status, the same degree. But what they taught was the Old Testament, because that's what they had. And so what's wrong with that? They taught the Old Testament. Fair enough. They passed down oral traditions and talked about them. And really, what's wrong with that? Here's what they taught. The doctrines is that God controls all things, but decisions made by individuals affect life's course. Was probably pretty accurate for us. Makes sense. There will be a resurrection. And there is an afterlife with appropriate reward and punishment on an individual basis. Now that's not as consistent as what we've taught lately. So reward and punishment based on an individual basis. I don't know where Jesus' forgiveness flows in there. But all this kind of makes sense for Jesus. And what the people thought of the Pharisees is they were admired. They were heroes. So what did Jesus think of the Pharisees?
Vipers.
Huh?
Vipers.
They're vipers, okay?
Toxic.
Toxic.
Whitewashed.
They whitewashed. Yeah. See, the Pharisee, everybody goes to the temple to do what?
You see,
And people go into, not the Pharisees, people go into the temples to
Pray.
pray. The Pharisees go into the temple to,
toot the horn and then break.
this is what I did. Put the check, I call it the scoreboard Christian. And Jesus's parables were really interesting. They had some consistency about them. Jerry taught me this. Jesus also took the heroes of the people and in parables made them villains. He did that more than once, and you'll see he did that here. Who is do you think, the most famous Pharisee of them all? Very good. Paul was obviously a Pharisee. He was a zealot. And he was abiding by the laws by going out and killing until who did he meet one day? Yeah, Jesus. So let's look what Jesus had to say. Jesus had a number of things here. I mean, it's all through Matthew, but I'm going to read this to you so you get an idea of Jesus's perspective on the Pharisees. I'm going to read,
I would propose that Jesus had some very good friends that were Pharisees.
Pardon me?
I propose that Jesus had some very good friends that were Pharisees.
I'm sure he did.
Nicodemus.
Well, Nicodemus was a purporter, and he was a Pharisee. I mean, he was a purporter of Christ, no question about it. But generally, how did Jesus think about Pharisees?
I think Jesus loved the Pharisees as much as he loves any of us. Some of their actions were very counter to his way of doing business.
Well, let's see what he says about it. Woe to you, teach. This is Matthew 23, verse 23 and on. Woe to you, teachers of law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You have a tenth of your plants of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former, you blind guides. You strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. I love that. Yeah. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees! You are hypocrites. You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteousness, and you say, if we had lived in the days of our forefathers, we would have not taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophet. Fill up then the measure of the sin and your forefathers, you snakes, you brood of lepers. Jesus, how do you really feel about that? I mean, holy smokes. Now, there's more than that in here, I can tell you. You know, I mean, when they didn't wash their hands right, and, you know, there's more to it. Okay. The next participants in the story are the tax collectors. All right, can someone give me an idea as to how a tax collector is selected? How do you become a tax collector? Anybody know? Anyone give it a try?
Jews looked at them as traitors to
Sell out? All right, yeah, they sold out. Yeah.
traitors.
Huh?
Traitors.
I explained
They
it.
were traitors to the Jewish nation.
Traitors.
Traders. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
They buy the job, John?
Yeah.
That's right.
They did. They did on it. Yes, sir.
They were contractors.
Huh?
What would you say? Because we are learning about the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the hypocrisy. What would you put today's church in such a light? Are we in the same plane? Because we're not talking just Seventh-day Adventists, we're talking evangelical.
You know what? I want to save that
For later?
till after we read the scripture.
Okay.
Because it's irrelevant. It's very relevant. But I gotta get some water under the bridge with defining that. But I have something that I have a view on. It's a good question. Yes, ma'am.
The big sin with the Pharisees was not their obedience to the law, but their pride in themselves because they felt like they kept it perfectly. The Sadducees, what drove them was greed.
Well, I think the pride issue is what we're gonna drive a truck through here shortly. Okay? Tax collectors, yes, sir.
Well, back to the Pharisees, wasn't their main issues they were misrepresenting God? That's what Jesus was so inflamed about, that they're supposed to be representing God and they were doing exactly the opposite.
Who were they representing?
Probably themselves.
Themselves. Who is their God? Themselves.
But that was what brought Satan down. He wanted to be God.
Yeah, they're gonna come down. They're gonna come down, as we will, if we don't take note, by the way. Tax collectors. Here's what here's what it is, to get back to what Vic was saying. The Romans formed what they call joint stock companies. And they would buy certain Jewish provinces for periods of 5 years. Okay, and then the Roman businessmen would employ local Jewish men to collect taxes from these territories. The tax collectors would then tax imports, exports, bridge tolls, road money, town dues, and much more. The highest bidder would win the territory. And consequently, the tax collector would skim money off the top for themselves. So the tax collectors, they'd say, you need to come up with $1 million. And they would try anything above $1 million was profit. So they would obviously were motivated to tax as much as they could. What was the methods of tax collection? If you look at it by today's standards, they're unethical to say the least. For one, they could harass people whenever they wanted to. They could tax them on the spot. So in other words, you could get taxed and you pay your tax. And then you walk down the road a mile, and another tax collector sees you and you get taxed again. That happened. Oh, by the way, the person standing to the next tax collector was a Roman soldier with a spear. Oh, but if you didn't like it, you could go to the judge. You know? By the way, the judges got percentage of this crop. So, you know, they were highly motivated to inspire you to pay more taxes. It was a mess. They put fictitious values on property. If you can't pay your taxes, the tax collector would loan you the money. Now, the tax collector didn't loan you the money. The tax collector just said, I'll loan you the money and charge an exorbitant rate for that loan. Very, very common. So the options that the Jewish people had was nothing. They couldn't really appeal to the judges. And so how did the people treat tax collectors? They hated them. You know, when I read this, that's sure they hated them. It was more than hate. I mean, these were the scum of the earth. I mean, tax collectors really couldn't go out into society. Because what would happen to them? Murder. They'd get knifed. Who did tax collectors socialize with? Other tax collectors. That was it. The rabbis taught that tax collectors were disqualified witnesses in court, social outcasts, and utter disgraces to their own family. The rabbis excommunicated tax collectors from the synagogue. Tax collectors weren't allowed to exchange their money in the temple treasury. The rabbis even considered it lawful to lie in almost any conceivable way to avoid paying tax collectors. Someone like the IRS today, forget I said that. It's not true.
Sorry, but
Consequently, it was thought no one would take this job, and then unless they were low-life criminal scum of the earth. No one would do this. And so, how popular was it when Jesus, you know, tagged Matthew to be a part of his inner circle?
Or Zacchaeus.
Huh?
Or Zacchaeus, when he told him, I'll stay in your house today.
Sure, you bet. What did they think? Well, and that's like this. That's like, I read this. It's like Billy Graham going to the worst Columbia drug dealer and putting him in his inner circle. I mean, and later on, you know, I discovered that when Jesus was on trial, this was brought up. Look who he has as part of his inner circle. So this was not, for Jesus to do that as a sidelight, was not a popular move. So now with that, let's read Luke 18, 9 through 14. Luke 18. And some of you have brought some things up concerning pride and stuff, and we're going to get into that. That's really important. So Luke 18, 9 through 14. That in your harmony, 122. By the way, if you want a harmony, which is what the textbook we use, I should have brought this up initially. We have some in the back. Feel free to take it. It's a comparison of the gospel. Does anybody want a harmony or need one?
Hey, John,
Yeah,
it's not page 120.
it's 122.
No,
It's page 138.
it's the item number 122.
Okay.
Page 138.
Page 138. Item 122. All right. Luke 18, 9 through 14. To some who were confident of their own right and looked down on everybody else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood up and prayed about himself. God, I thank you that I am not like other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like the tax collector. I fast twice a week, give a tenth of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, I am a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Now describe the Pharisee. Have you ever said, I am glad I am not like him? Last time I did that was, I think, yesterday or the day before. There was a group of people that I was with every week. One of those men goes and visits his son every couple months because he's in jail for the rest of his life for murder down in Florida. Another one has a child that's in a psychiatric ward. Another has a kid who's driven to inappropriate behavior and now does not have any social order or social judgment. He's socially incompetent, going through huge divorces. I'm sure glad I'm not like him. Now, is that wrong for me to think that?
Are you giving thanks to God in a way for your circumstances
For
that
my-
God has had a role in?
For my path.
Yeah, but you're not saying, I don't think, that that is a sinner that's going to hell. That's not what you're doing.
That's fair.
That's merciful.
Yeah.
I think it's it's only by the grace of God that we aren't in that place.
Right.
Yeah, it's whether you're saying in humility or whether you're saying with, I'm so thankful I was such a good father, not like those poor slobs.
I am so great.
Yeah.
I'm even modest when I talk about my modesty.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the question is, are you confident in your own righteousness?
Oh, that's really fair to think about. Are you confident in your own righteousness?
I am so blessed, and I am so thankful for that. Now, does that put me in a position where people maybe aren't as blessed as I am? I don't know, but I am thankful for my blessing.
You bet. And sometimes maybe that at least allowing to see that, I guess, comparison, we understand that better. I guess in context, it's all right, I suppose. Yes, sir.
But I think in that context, you can feel blessed without comparing yourself to anyone. I mean, you might maybe have a disease and you like, thank you, Lord, I made it through the day. You're not comparing yourself with anyone else. You're just feeling blessed yourself.
But fair enough. But we still live in the context of our times. We still have landscape out there that, oh man, I'm glad I don't live under a bridge. That's the context I see. So that's what makes it fair enough. But it's kind of, I don't know, you can see how it maybe confusing, maybe? Yeah, Roy. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, you can live under a bridge and still feel blessed.
Good. You could. Be a stretch for me, all right? But yeah, right.
Even though we feel blessed, if we aren't humble in our hearts, blessing isn't real.
Humility is going to bleed into this discussion, right? It's got to. Yes, sir.
I think there was a temptation back in that day to say, okay, because I'm doing well, nothing bad is happening to me that I haven't sinned or I haven't, I've done things right. And Jesus spoke to that, at least once. And I think that's the temptation today too.
See, I think what you just said is this. The Pharisee goes into the temple and lists these things that I've done. And I am righteous. I deserve paradise, Christ. You know, God, look what I've done. You know? Yeah.
And I think we need to have an empathetic spirit in us to try to empathize and put ourselves in other people's shoes. Otherwise, we might be stepping into judging people when we don't know what kind of life experiences they have.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. That's exactly right. Well, instead of putting your thumb on someone's head, they didn't walk our path, we didn't walk theirs. Maybe we should try to lift them up. This and here.
I think we have a really difficult time comparing ourselves to, say, a sex trafficker, a drug kingpin, a serial killer. You know, those are something that we can't even think about ever doing. But when we compare ourselves to Christ or to God, we're all in the same boat, folks. We're all sinners in need of the blood of Christ.
You know, what makes it so relevant, what you just said, the way I cook that down is there's some people we don't allow in this church.
Oh, yeah.
Fair enough, you know, but however, what was brought up, I don't know, some months ago was, how would you feel if you walked into heaven and Hitler was sitting there? Would you be mad? Well, don't worry, because if you'd be mad, you wouldn't be walking into paradise. You know, you won't be. Makes sense. Because only the Father does that, decides that. Yes, sir.
I'm not trying to put people that are well off down. And this is not any judgment on anybody, but I think there's a tendency to, for someone whose life is pretty darn easy, to think, well, I'm all right with God. Look how he's blessed me. The corollary to that is it's real hard for a camel to get through the eye of the needle. And a rich man is going to have a hard time getting in there. And I'm not, that's Jesus thing. That's not me.
Yeah, well, we can enlighten it. Not you, huh? Okay, I'm glad you clarified. You know, but then we got to get, I mean, I'm not going to get into this discussion trying to find what wealth and rich is.
No, I'm not categorizing it. I'm just saying, I can see where that could put you at ease when maybe we shouldn't be.
Fair. Yeah, of course.
Empathy, I'm glad the gentleman over there brought that up. It seems to me that if you have empathy for others, then God is working through you. Empathy doesn't come from selfishness.
Good point.
Empathy is, some people don't have it.
It's different. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just kind of reviewing a little bit in my mind. But we leave, 600 years ago, Malachi, they've got the Old Testament to work with. And we have heard, they have heard over and over and over. You follow me, I'm going to make you rich. You don't follow me, you're going to be poor. You're going to be. And so it appears that they twisted this into a lifestyle. But if you go through the Old Testament, you can see where they would build this, and they were doing everything they could to protect themselves from falling into those sins. So we have to be a little bit of a flexibility in that area.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is something back on the fact that we make change. We can make change, and it's part of what we are supposed to do. However, all of us will go through discouragement and be overwhelmed by life because Satan is in this kingdom and he is stronger than we are. And therefore, we have to have the grace of God to be able to make that choice. And that gives us the power to be able to make the choice that is for his kingdom.
Well, do you think this tax collector is going through a hard time right now in this parable? You sure? Look how it's described.
I know.
Sure, they're going through a hard time. They're an outcast.
Pardon me?
They're going through a hard time. They're an outcast.
I think this tax collector was just kind of, I can't do this anymore. I mean, I am a bad person. I have no choices. I have no out. This is my only out. I mean, the parable was kind of presented that way. I mean, Matthew did get up and follow Christ. What out did he have? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
I think that, the comparisons of the rich, the poor, God's view of riches is much different than ours. But anytime we compare, problem with comparing is we're looking at ourselves and not at God. And if we look at God, it totally changes the outcome. But if I'm looking at me and looking at you, I might say, oh, you're better, you're richer than me, so poor me. Or I might say, oh, you're poorer than me, so oh, lucky me. Or I might say, but if we're looking at God, we all are pretty much on the same plane.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. We're all there. Did you want to finish?
Well, I was going to say something similar to what she said. The issue is you can be grateful for your blessings, but the issue comes when you compare yourself to somebody else, because the process of comparing yourself to somebody else, in essence, is making a judgment. And it's not our right to make a judgment of somebody else.
Unless you want to be judged. Right. Fair enough.
That's God's responsibility, not ours.
Yeah. I'm sorry, right here and there.
To go back to your statement of how you responded to that, I'm glad I'm not like these other guys. You missed an opportunity, as all of us have done, to praise God at that moment, to say, God, thank you for leading me in a way that I did not have to follow and have the trials that these other guys are having.
Right, because it looks so difficult when you see it. Yes, sir.
All right. I want to do two things. One is I want to bring Deuteronomy with the curses and the blessings. All right, it's very clear. If you do the will of God and what he commands, you will be blessed. Then I'll take you to when Jesus said, when the disciples asked, Rabbi, whose sin is this blind guy? Is the parents or himself? And Jesus said, neither. So, and then he used that blind person to testify of the Messiah, that he gave testimony and witness of Christ. Now, when we ask the question comparing ourselves, I don't think that is a right or wrong. It is your heart that is before God. It's the only one that you will be judged. And if you said it in the intentions that you were better than the other, you and God has to talk. And if not.
Well, intent is huge. I agree with that. Yes, Orwell.
I want to thank our friend Joe.
Louder.
I want to thank our friend Joe up in North Carolina. Nobody in the Bible had a close relationship to God than Job. But boy, he took hell for it. How many times do we have a cushy life? And how many times are we not being attacked by Satan? Versus how many times are we being attacked by Satan? Because Satan is gone to God and said, hey, you got a servant down here. And he's calling you for the wrong reason. So when I start feeling too good about myself, I start wondering if I'm in the wrong camp because Satan doesn't want to look at me.
Self-righteousness is very dangerous. Okay, so I got to tell you this story. I found it hilarious. You guys probably don't, but it's in my book. But so I ran a large financial institution for the central part of the country, which most do. And we would have these meetings every once in a while. And we would have to get together to solve a problem. And my peers and I would get together, and there'd be 6 or 7 of us from around the country would get together. And you would think that the mission was to solve the problem. That was not the case. The mission was to have the best idea. So this would be a very good meeting if at the end of the meeting, someone says, John had the best idea. We should do what John says. Everybody says, yep, I win. It wasn't a group win. I win. That's the self-righteous culture that exists. That's not abnormal, by the way. Probably many of you sitting in this room can give examples like that. They're there. And it doesn't make any difference what part of society you're in, public, non-public, for profit, not, it doesn't make any difference. It's there. How would you describe the tax collectors? And how did Jesus describe the tax collector?
Forgiven.
Forgiven. Forgiven.
Humble.
Humble. The tax collector was humble. Wrote that down.
Now, truly sorry from the heart.
He was sorry. I think he was almost embarrassed.
Aren't we all?
I hope so. I don't think we all are. No, everybody in this room is. I think he was scared.
He was a little desperate sound.
And what?
End of his rope.
End of his rope. Yeah.
Desperate.
Desperate.
Ready to
Actually-
change.
He was very brave to show up at all.
This guy couldn't.
He didn't have a Roman guard with him, I don't think.
No, he had more of a chance of getting knifed here.
He wouldn't likely be going there.
He wasn't welcome in this group.
The unusual thing.
I want to thank her for speaking up. It's the first time I've heard that.
Well, you don't live my life. Thank you anyway, Gordon.
John?
It's the best. No, I mean that. Yes, ma'am.
Comes through to me is that Jesus is, when he's talking over and over again, we see compassion is something he depicts in everything he does. And he had compassion for this tax collector. As you see the difference in what he's going through, he understood that. You got the thief on the cross, the guy that had leprosy. Over and over, you see compassion. He sees deeper. And even with the men that you mentioned, compassion for their lives. It's horrible for your child to be in jail so there's a compassion that comes through.
I think that's a message that we can get from this, walking out of that room. That's one. There'll be a couple others, I hope. But showing compassion when it isn't the cool thing to do. And that can be tough, particularly when you've been wronged or your children have been wronged. Yes, ma'am.
It helps me to remember that hurt people hurt others.
Mhm.
And if I can see them as a hurt person instead of the perpetrator,
Then the compassion bleeds in.
then I can have compassion.
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say that. I think like with these men that you had in this group that you are with or whatever, that we need to surround them with love and prayer to uplift them, because can you imagine, just like the tax collectors of the Bible, they had families. Their families were probably out of the synagogues that they couldn't get. Their friends didn't want to be along to them anymore. They need to be uplifted, the parents of these children.
Well, just think of the potential that was lost by having that type of an attitude of a culture. Just we're better together than we are apart. Look at ourselves as a church, because it exists in church too. We're better this way than kind of going it alone. And to do that, compassion's got to bleed in. Oh, also, we have to disagree and respect it. Yeah, Roy.
I don't think God wants any of us to get into that position of life. And in the sermon the pastor's giving today is on the transfiguration of Christ. And with the weight of the world on Christ and the fact and his humanity that he had accepted, he could be overwhelmed. And so God gave him the transfiguration experience to give him the courage to face the things that were ahead of him. So that he would not have it. I think that's true for all of his children, that he doesn't want us to get down to where the tax collector have gotten. He wants us to be able to be held up.
He does not want us to get there, but if you get there, there is hope. But, you know, sometimes I've told the story before where I took a position and I was in my cul-de-sac in my house, and I mean, it was as clear as day. Some of you have heard this. I mean, God said it. I mean, out loud. There's no in my mind. It was a voice. It was a deep voice. He said, "Don't go. John, don't go." I said, "I never asked you." And I got in my car and went. So I can just picture today God sitting back in his easy chair thinking the boy needs to ripen a little more. You know, he's going to have to walk more of a path here. And it was a short time later and I came back. But true story, that's not in the book. Yes, sir.
Kind of a rhetorical question, but is it a more dangerous place to be a tax collector or a drug user or a prostitute, or to be a self-righteous religious leader?
I don't know. The self-righteous is dangerous. I know that. And like was talked before, I'm not judging. I don't want to judge. I don't know what put those people in that path. I don't know what it is. But you said it best. If I am empathetic, I got to understand what I don't understand, baby. The self-righteousness is dangerous. And the reason why it's sensitive to me, because I've been places in my life where I probably have been. We've mentioned something here with the tax collector. We've mentioned humility. You know, and my quote was, "I'm even modest when I talk about my modest." Well, let's talk about what is there such a thing as good humility and bad humility? Describe that. What's good humility and what's humility that's not so good?
Bad humility, seems to me, would be when its purpose is to influence others to your goodness.
Yeah, and when I start out saying, and I know I'm a stupid person, but let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm
you better follow
so,
it.
yeah, well, if I think I'm so stupid, that's self-righteous. Yes, ma'am.
C.S. Lewis says, humility is not thinking less of myself, it's thinking of myself less.
Ooh,
That's right.
very good. Yes, ma'am.
Just saying that, so maybe bad humility is self-serving, where good humility, recognizing our position before God.
Yeah, what she said was very important, I think, so I'm going to, I'll say it out loud in front of everybody here. You correct me where I'm wrong. The punchline is, bad humility is when the humility is self-serving. Good humility is when it is selfless, when I'm trying to raise others up. See, I always thought humility, I mean, if you ever worked for somebody that was not secure in themselves, that was a problem. And they weren't humble. because that was a tool they used, that self-righteousness, to try to pump themselves up. Bad leadership. Humble doesn't mean you're insecure. Humble means that you understand what you're not good at, but you're not going to do it at the expense of what you are good at. You're all good at, don't back away from that, but understand what you need to work on. Yes.
I was going to say, we're talking about humility as though it's something that you can have, but it's a passing thing. You can be humble for a minute or two, but realistically, anybody here done anything where they didn't consider themselves as part of the equation? Well, that'd be great to do. How's this going to affect me? Is it going to take me time? Somewhere in our head, will people see this in a good way? So, we have degrees of humility, but no one's humble.
Okay.
Not a single person in here is humble. Sorry to offend anyone, but I'll guarantee you they're not.
Well, I'm not offended. Gordon is, but I am not. Gordon, great area.
Then it was worth saying.
But thank you. Gordon thanks you. One more. Go ahead and say, Gordon, you're next. You can clean that up. All right.
Well, I have a problem with good humility and bad humility. Humility defines itself. You're humble or you're not humble. It's not good humility. It is a condition in itself. It is always good, because that's by definition, it's what it is. Now, I think what happens is part of that definition includes this idea of meekness, gentleness. That's where then you can do fake meekness or fake gentleness and true gentleness or kindness.
I'm going to tie the knots together in 1 second. Gordon, go ahead.
That very issue, it seems to me, the humility that most of us experience in our lives, where we are humble, is where we've been put down. That we are, in fact, it's a little bit like the king calling you out because he's mad at you. You're not going to stand up in most cases and argue with him. You get down on your knees and you humble yourself. That's not real humility that we're talking about. No. But that's the most common thing I think we deal with. I think it's really hard to be truly humble.
Oh, it's really hard. Well, let's talk about pride a second. I mean, good humility, bad humility. Okay, maybe that's difficult to tie together. What about pride? Is there good pride and bad pride?
Yeah.
How?
A job well done.
You take pride in it.
I like doing a good job.
You take pride in it.
I got it. I agree with the gentleman in the back. You are self-righteous as well by the example you did with your people when you met with the lieutenants.
Yeah.
Basically, each one of us in psychology has what is called a self-image of ourselves. That is self-righteousness.
Self-righteous.
But what we actually are called is to compare ourselves in the light of Christ. Now, that is the two that we need, the other element that we need to put together. Because otherwise I am self-righteous in my image of myself. And when it comes to the pride or no pride, it applies the same thing. If you don't put in the light of Christ, and this is why there is called the narrow road, because it's not as obvious as we think.
Yeah, I can't go down that because I don't have enough time. Because what you said in the light of Christ, well, my light of Christ and how I look at that is very different maybe than yours. And so we can't do that. Well, maybe not, maybe. There is a line there where it might be self, maybe not, in my view. Yeah.
That proves the point.
And I'm wondering if those fruits of the Spirit, in Galatians, where I was looking at the word, these are things that God gives you. They're not human things. They are spiritual things. They're fruits of the Spirit. So you only can have humility if you have the Spirit in you. It's the only way. It's not a human possibility. It is a gift of the Spirit, fruit of the Spirit, whatever.
You see, An example of good of pride that is probably good is when you, I think, I appreciate being around people that take pride in themselves. I appreciate that. I think that's important. When you look in the mirror, you take pride how you look, or you take pride in your health, or you take pride in those things. Fair enough. But where do you cross the line with pride? Because right here, Jesus said, you prideful hypocrites. He uses the word pride, scripture, and not in a positive way. Yes, sorry, somebody.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking of it in terms of, when you have, I think good pride is when you've given your best, to represent God as best as you can possibly be, with the gifts that are here and that He's given you. And you feel good about the fact that, it feels like He's been able to use you to accomplish something through you. But it's Him working through you, in other words, where bad pride is when we begin to assign the glory and the everything that happened to, because I'm so great.
You've said that twice now. You've insinuated that twice, where one is selfless, one is self-serving.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the line is.
I was going to say, to me, pride is always attached to self. And if we're selfless, we don't have that.
If we're selfless, did you get that? You don't like that?
No.
If you're selfless, you don't like pride. All right, let me throw it to you this way, because we're going to sum this up here. We got about 5 minutes. When I do leadership workshops, seldom do I not start a workshop, and some of you have been in this room, where I don't start out by asking you to think about, I've done it in this room too, I don't mean to be redundant, about somebody that you reported to that you did not respect, that you didn't like. Anybody ever report to somebody that you did not respect and you didn't like? Nobody, huh? Yes. All right. Most, in the scope of life, with most of the folks in this room, given our experience, we probably have. And I can get a list of stuff as why didn't you respect them? They were a bully. They expected more of me than they expected from themselves. They showed favorites. I can get the list. But if I came up with one word that would describe it, 100, every single time I've done it, one word comes up that describes that person. It's self-serving. They were in it for more than themselves. They were in it for only themselves. Versus now picture the one you respect, that you even love. The word that comes up after that is usually selfless. They were in it more for me than themselves. Selfless. And I think there is a very important line there. The Pharisee was giving the list of things that he had done for self-serving intent. Versus the follower of Christ, that's not an easy path. There's got to be a selfless proposition. Think about the last verse in Matthew, where Jesus' last words is go out and make disciples of all people and know I'm with you to the end of time. He didn't, that's all about others. It's not, I can give 10%, or I can do this. But if I am not making an effort to do that mandate, I must be falling short. That's what he's asked us to do. And what gets in the way of us doing this can be self-righteousness, pride, arrogance. And so, yeah, go ahead. Don't go ahead before I sum it up.
Perhaps the opposite of pride is gratitude. When I look in the mirror and instead of saying, oh, don't I look good? I say, thank you, Lord, that or I'm healthy, or I maintain a good weight, or I do this and I do that. Instead of looking in the mirror and say, I'm so glad that I'm this wonderful person. When I look in the mirror, I should say, thank you, Lord, for my good health. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunities that you've given me to do things for others. Taking the focus off of me and put the focus on God and how He's blessed me, and not that I'm great.
So last comment.
It's okay. I know you're kind of crunched on the time.
Well, I want everybody to think like this. I mean, here's a question I could pose, and we could discuss it, but we don't have time. I want you to think about David, the good David. When David was doing good, what was it about David when he was doing really good? You know, he was serving, he was selfless. I mean, he was a servant, very good, the shepherd boy. And what was the David? How would you describe David with Bathsheba and Uriah? Now, how would you discuss him there? What kind of David are we dealing with there?
A murderer.
And so, you know, when you look at this within ourselves, now I've asked everybody to reflect here with your own lives. And you know, we can have discussions and debate and agreement and disagreement. It's great. That's just fine. But the jewel is within each one of us. Where am I self-righteous? Where do I need to be a little more humble? Where do I need to lift you up and even in jeopardy of myself? When can I do that? When do I do things in such a way that nobody knows it but me, and I know it's right? No intent to self-serve. When do I do that? And I want you to think about that with yourself. And it's very healthy to reflect on those times you did well, and also to think about the times where if you had it to do over again, and that's how we learn and change and transform. And that's what this lesson is about. Yes, Vic?
I was gonna say, when you do something and tell no one, you still know. And your human nature says, kind of did a good thing there. I think at some level, we all live there. It's just,
I think
it's our human nature, it's our carnal nature.
Yeah,
It's
I
the
think
lack of being led by the Holy Spirit that causes us to go to that human place. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do.
I don't think it is.
But for us to take some type of pride,
You know what?
that is a little dangerous.
You know, I don't know, Vic. You know, let me change this word. You know, you and I agree about 10% of the time. I know we do. I think that I guess I term it like this is the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do, and I'm going to do it.
I agree.
Then I'm there. Do we agree on that?
We won't argue that.
Let's get our 10%.
There's a right thing to do.
All right. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our study this morning. My prayer is somehow in this discussion that you took something out of it from the lessons of the Pharisee, the tax collector, and what Jesus taught us in this parable. We talked about self-righteousness. We talked about humility. We talked about pride and how some of these things can get in our way. But if we can get them out of our way and together grow and help each other, inspire each other, I'll leave you with this in our community of disagreement and in our environment of constant arguing. I'm a student of leadership. I don't care what the view of the leader is necessarily, but if I got a leader in front of me that's selfless, versus one that I may agree with, but is self-serving. I think it's time we look at that. I'm not talking about the political arena at all. I'm talking about just life. Father, thank you for bringing us all together this morning. Thank you for this wonderful season. We are reminded of the birth of the Christ child, what that means to us. We know there are people out there that are very much challenged. We ask you to be with them, be with Marlene. Be with people that are traveling. Keep them safe. Be with those missionaries that work so hard and sacrifice so much. Thank you for each other. Thank you for our families. Please take us out of this road and help us understand the path you've carved for us, and help us live the life that Jesus wanted us to live. In your name, amen. You can do that.